Well, greetings everyone, and welcome back to our Standing Watch program. In light of the recent bailout of Ireland and concerns regarding Portugal and Spain, speculations are floating around again that the Eurozone will break up and that the Euro will be abandoned very soon, and that the nations will go back to their original national currencies. Well, my friends, I'm here to tell you that that idea is absolutely ridiculous, absurd, and it's not going to happen. And more newspaper articles and magazines realize the fact that even though they may not be friends of the Euro is here to stay. And I'm not necessarily a friend of the Euro either, but I'm here to tell you the facts. So speculations are not based on facts at all. They are based on imaginations. Now let me read to you first of all from an article in the left liberal magazine, Der Spiegel Online, which was published in Germany. And of course, they are not necessarily a friend of the Euro or of the Angela Merkel government. But notice what they had to admit. And this is an article published November 24. Europe is gripped by a sense of alarm now that Ireland has become the second Eurozone country to ask for a bailout. Pessimists claim that the crisis means the Euro is finished. But that scenario is unrealistic. In reality, there is little to suggest that the common currency is about to disintegrate. The article goes on to say, European governments are serious about austerity, while in the US there is no sign of how President Barack Obama plans to get his country's $1 trillion deficit under control. Close to 9% of all US public spending this year was financed on credit, a considerably greater amount than in the Eurozone. And whereas the European Central Bank has at least kept the inflation rate in mind with its currency policies, the US Federal Reserve keeps pumping billions of new dollars into the economy. It is unclear what the outcome of this gigantic wager will be. It goes on to say, the Japanese economy has experienced a lasting recession over the past 20 years, and this year it is likely to be overtaken by China. By comparison, Europe looks as dynamic as an emerging economy. The public debt in Japan is at about 200% of GDP, around 2.5% or times as high as the Eurozone average. And then it says, the much celebrated emerging economies themselves are still packed with risks when it comes to investment possibilities. No one knows exactly how long the growth of the Chinese economy will continue. And then this article concludes with the following remarkable admissions. Compared to the United States and Japan, the Eurozone states can already point to initial successes in sorting out their finances. In addition, their economies are in a better shape. That will help to ensure that the Euro remains one of the world's most important, notice this, one of the world's most important and thus attractive currencies. Bloomberg over here in the United States was another news agency which sometimes had some very disparaging comments to make about the Euro, but they apparently reverted their opinion because in an article which was published on November 25, this is what they had to say. The European banking system would be nearly bust if the Euro were to be abandoned, which means a 16-member currency cannot and should not go, Evolution Securities Ltd. said. If the Euro is abandoned, devaluations would follow immediately. And then they go on to say, devaluations mean write-offs of a size that would render the whole European banking system completely insolvent. And then it goes on to say, the damage caused by the abandonment of the Euro would be such that such an outcome is impossible. Such an outcome is impossible. And the only way forward for Europe is fiscal union. It is simply too late, this expert wrote. There are too many cross-border investments in Europe to go back to national currencies. And then, to top it all off, a very interesting article was published by BBC News on November 24. Now, of course, England has not adopted the Euro, and there is really not a great likelihood that they ever will. They're not part of the Eurozone either. But the BBC had to admit that there's really no practical way that Europe will abandon the Euro. And notice how they explain this conclusion. They said, much has been written about the theoretical attractions for financially troubled countries in exciting or abandoning the Eurozone. But the question of how a country would go about it is less well explored. And the more closely you examine the question of how, as opposed to why, a country might leave the euro, the clearer it becomes that the practical difficulties are huge. It goes on to say, to establish a new currency, a country would have to convert all existing euro-denominated savings at a fixed rate on a given date. But savers and businesses would not wait passively for that date to arrive. The first practical problem then is that if it becomes clear that a country is seriously thinking of leaving the euro, a huge amount of money will leave the country. That is sometimes referred to as capital flight. The overall effect would be to trigger huge transfers of deposits out of the country and wreck the banking system. But if a prolonged national debate about leaving the euro creates a risk of capital flight, would the alternative be to prepare in secret and announce it suddenly? The idea that huge numbers of new banknotes could be prepared and distributed in secret is absurd. And then it goes on to say, the euro came into circulation without too many hitches, albeit with many years of preparation. East Germany's Ostmarks were converted into Deutschmarks. But the key difference is that in these cases, the currency into which savings were being switched was perceived to be stable. The incentive for capital flight did not exist. If the fundamental problem is substituting a weak currency for a strong one, the most practical solution would be for the strongest members of the Eurozone to leave the currency union. It means that Germany could leave the euro while weaker nations could not. It seems massively unlikely that a German government would initiate the breakup of the euro. The euro was not designed with any possibility of breakup in mind. And I would say that truer words have seldom been spoken. The whole concept that the euro would be abandoned is nonsense. It is also nonsense based on biblical prophecy. You see, the Bible has prophesied thousands of years ago that there is going to be a very powerful, strong economic bloc. Babylon, it is called in Revelation 18. Extremely powerful, more powerful economically and even also militarily ultimately than the United States of America, Great Britain, China, Japan, Russia, you name it. The Bible is not indicating at all that that power bloc would be destroyed until after the Great Tribulation has begun. So the idea that they would do away with the euro and thereby destroy themselves is just blatantly ridiculous. What is, however, possible is that out of this present crisis, let's say in Europe, a group of 10 nations will emerge. We have heard about core Europe. We've heard about Europe of two speed. But you see, it's coming out of this power bloc. They are going to be still part of it. And these 10 nations, as the Bible says in Revelation 17, will give their power and their authority to a very charismatic, albeit ruthless, military and economic leader. We already hear about two camps in Europe right now. The one being led by Germany. The other one composed of and comprised of the so-called PIGS nations, those weaker economic nations, including Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. And of course, they want Europe to bail them out completely, and of course, Angela Merkel and that camp is not willing to do that. Now, it's possible that out of this situation, the core nations of Europe will evolve, but not insofar as the euro is going to be destroyed. That's not going to happen, my friends. We can say this dogmatically. We challenge you to keep watching our programs because you hear the truth on these programs. And don't listen to these speculations which are floating around all over based on imaginations but not on facts. Thanks very much for watching. This is Standing Watch.